Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Near Darling, and shall we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where my mic's in a weird place, there's a town on my head. You know the drill. That's not the drill. But yes, the D&D session resumed for the other campaign. How was it? It was strange in a very different way, which is what I told my friends afterwards. Because a lot of our previous sessions have been very strange, or like in a very insanely chaotic way. This one, it was more strange in a much more subdued way or anything, but the entire time I was DMing it, I was like, I feel like I'm DMing like a sitcom episode or something. We'll get into it, but good evening everyone, I'm here with a late night broadcast. Hope I can make it through this, but right now in Fawnhallow it's 12:17 AM on what should be Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. Yes, so what I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? Yeah, it was just like, I think the best way to describe it is, it made me think of something like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I've never watched, or maybe like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I've never watched, and it felt like basically a sitcom where we were following in like all the different sort of plot lines that people were going on, like one of the group was, you know, like they just got sort of shenanigans. One of the biggest motivators for one of the groups is, for whatever reason, they were trying to find one of their party members like a date. How did that come about? I guess it came about because there was like quite a few attempts before, you know, some hits and misses, I think, when it comes to romanticizing. And I think the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the romanticizing has been with NPCs where it's like it would make no sense whatsoever. They would not even give you the time of day, which maybe that's on me for making a lot of NPCs which would not give them the time of day, but so yeah, so I guess it sort of became a thing where like they're not really in downtime. They've kind of just hard pivoted to a different plot point, story arc entirely, but now they're sort of just waiting around in one area, which they don't even need to wait around in, but just sort of chilling here for a bit. It's given them the opportunity to, I don't know, I guess have a bit of fun. Work up a craftsman maybe. Is this like Apollo's? That's, yeah, what we're doing essentially. But it has very much led to an interesting situation, because the first person that he ended up talking to, you know, the other three are basically trying to scout out someone, and they went to a tavern and they started hanging out, and the first person he spoke to, he was like, no, you know, I don't think either of us, you know, wanted to talk any further. But the second one, you know, behind the scenes, I'll give you a bit of a peek behind the curtain for DMs, is a lot of the times when something random happens, or I'm like, oh, you know, I don't know necessarily to what extent this will be, you know, successful for them, but it's not like a skill-based thing, it's based off luck, essentially. I will roll a D100, and then I have a metric in my mind for basically a D100 for rough thresholds for something either interesting happening, and then also something either really good or something rather bad happening. So yeah, I rolled a D100 behind the scenes, and it came as something very interesting and very good happening, and I was like, okay, interesting. Because this was a roll for like, oh, is there anyone around, you know, this sort of thing, like you go to a bar to meet people, you know, that's essentially what happened. So I, as a DM, you know, another pro DM tip is have a load of NPCs who are named, have images as well, but you've not necessarily strictly defined what their role is, you know, you have a very sort of vague idea of who they are, you know, then you can pull them out for when they're just like, oh, give us a random NPC, and you're like, this NPC should be a bit more important. That's what I did. I was sort of like scouring my NPCs, being like, okay, who would make sense in this situation? And then I settled on one. And yeah, I mean, then he basically just went on a really nice date, to be honest. It was a nice change of pace, I think, from the other opportunities he's had, which have maybe not all of them gone as so well. None of them, I suppose, having a level of romance to them. which is not really what I was expecting to get into in a D&D campaign, but here we are. But yeah, honestly, it was a very nice time, and he rolled decent well, and I rolled again behind the scenes, and it was again like it was something to, not quite to the same extent, but also like something good and interesting happens. So I was like, you know what, in for a penny, in for a pound. You know, we've committed hard enough with the jokes and that sort of thing. You know, let's get something good going as well. So basically, this player just had like a storybook romance movie, you know, like, you know, he had his like notebook, he had his, I'm trying to think of another one. Love Actually, I don't really remember what that one's like, to be honest. What's that Christmas one, you know, like a bit of a cheesy Hallmark sort of Christmas style movie, which was interesting because this NPC, like a lot of the sort of like very quick NPCs, of course, are very tropey because they kind of have to be. I can say that behind the scenes, this one's tropiness was, her description was basically manic pixie dream girl. So yeah, he honestly was just having a really nice time. He had like a romantic moment, you know, they like snuck off to like the unbeaten path. They went like book shopping, they climbed to like the top of a city, and then there was like this really like textbook sort of movie moment, which I improvised. I didn't think about it beforehand. I didn't even think about the situation beforehand, but the player was like, oh, is there anything else that we should do off the beaten path? And I was like, of course the NPC would say yes. I don't know what. And then I was like, okay, they're gonna climb a royal palace, you know. Something which sort of goes into the realm of daring, you know, but also, you know, I don't know, necessarily worth it in the end. But they climbed it, and there was like a nice sort of viewpoint as they were just like spending time up there. And then I can't remember exactly how I thought about it, but it was like, oh, you know, this would be perfect time for this NPC to say something like romantic. And then I had like a vision when I was like, wait a minute, this player character knows how to cast fly, so let's say something which lets them cast it, and then they can have like a romantic like fly above a city as a way to round everything off. So I can't remember what she said. Like, I made it like she was just something like, oh, you know, I guess we just had to sort of wait and relax up here, but you know, it'd be really nice if we could both turn into birds and sort of fly away. It's kind of hard like for it in a manic pixie MPD sort of way, MPDG sort of way. And then he picked up on the hint and cast fly, and then that was that. But simultaneously, the other three members of the group, after seeing that he was successful, was like, yeah, high fives all around everyone. Like, they ended up just drinking some tea in the tavern, and it felt like it was sort of like misadventures, you know, the things that I don't know from which perspective. Like, is it from, it probably would cut back and forth between the two perspectives, but like one of them just like barges into the kitchen and just has some weird sort of interaction for no apparent reason, and then also they give tea to like someone else who's drinking tea, and then behind the scenes I rolled sorry, pause. But what I was saying is, what was I saying? Oh yeah, they gave tea to a stranger who was also drinking tea, but behind the scenes, let you know that I rolled something very interesting and very bad happens. So I was like, what can I even do? I mean, it was literally just like drinking tea, and I was like, okay, because we didn't know what tea leaves it was. I started dropping hints that he was essentially having an allergic reaction to a tea. So I described it to them as being, you know, like rather smooth, and it sort of builds up in intensity of like fullness of flavour, and it has a bit of sort of like a citrus aftertaste. And then the person who was drinking it, you know, was like, oh, it's like a very lovely, like spicy, fiery tea that sort of lingers in the mouth. And I kept saying things like that. And then he had an allergic reaction, to be honest. He was there with his family, and luckily the cleric, you know, cast like lesser restoration on him, and everything was a-okay. But a rather embarrassing situation, I suppose, or perhaps disheartening situation, because obviously she didn't mean to do that. But yeah, it was just sort of strange, and like it was very strange going from like very sort of like cute, pleasant sort of like romantic scene to being like, oh, you know, this guy almost dies because he's allergic to something in the tea. It was bizarre, I suppose, is probably the best way to put it. But yeah, what else happened? There was a moment where there was a bit of drama, quite drama. It wasn't actually drama between the player characters, because one went to get food from the food market, and then he, you know, saw that the others had left him, and then he, you know, cursed a name. They went out like wine tasting. I basically sort of weaved it together that way they would sort of run into each other in certain ways, but not fully run into each other. So you can imagine it as sort of like a background gag or something, you know, one player character talking to the NPC, you know, sort of like starting a conversation, and in the background you can see the other player character giving it to another NPC. You cut back to a shot and he's like on all fours on the ground, just sort of like coughing and choking, and then you cut back again, and then he's sort of like being like carried out on a stretcher or something. You can absolutely see that in like some silly sitcom thing, right? That's why I described it as so strange, because it kind of felt like a sitcom in some very bizarre, weird way. Trying to think what else happened as well, because surprisingly, like, quite a lot did happen. But there was a lot of just small things which I won't go into the details for. But yeah, I don't know. It's it very much felt like role playing a sitcom, and I was like, what is going on? More so than the absolute train wreck. Okay, maybe not more so, but to a very different way compared to the absolute train wreck execution of a plan they had once. That one I was just like, what is happening? This one I was just like, what is going on? It just, I don't know. I think it was just because it was, most of it was relatively silly, but in quite a sort of low stakes way, you know, not with like lasting, long reaching consequences. It was just sort of like a slightly comedic tone. No idea what that's going to necessarily mean for the future of the sessions and them chasing for plot point, but I guess we'll have to find out. So yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen next. Excuse me. It's just a strange situation. Kind of similar to I suppose how I felt with the other campaign group's previous session. I think it was where it felt like a sort of like a slapstick comedy, I suppose. But there's something very amusing, I think, by having the group split and then having a sort of tonal dissonance between the adventures and the misadventures of each of the groups. You know, one group doing something particularly serious and being like, I wonder what the other group's up to. You can't, they're doing something absolutely insane. It's hard to, I think, portray necessarily in D&D, but it's, I think, a lot easier to at least conceptually see it, understand it, you know, buy it and believe it. So yeah, I also did not plan as much for it. Not intentionally. The stuff I did plan was more like I expected them to sort of start departing to the next kingdom, but nope. Of course, why would they? Why would they? So, I guess I planned not a huge amount ahead, but certainly more ahead than I expected. But yeah, on that note, I think I'm not going to quite round this episode off here. You know, I draw the thumbnail up, of course, at least. So it was just a bit of a strange situation, like very, very heavily improvised compared to some sessions where I was just like, how should I do this? And if anything, I think it was a sort of nice change of pace. You know, a lot of the D&D campaign, like I think in one group it's much more, it feels like a lot more drama, not like necessarily interpersonal drama, but sort of like high stakes things are happening, big events. With sort of like light comedic slice of life-esque moments, and this group is more like a sort of soap opera of comedy. Just strange things happening in general, which Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but an interesting thing is probably how I describe it. Just the different vibes each of the groups give off. Yeah, I think one of my friends even said like we need like a laugh track or something. That's like what it felt like. Just cutting back and forth between the very different events which are happening. One of the players trying to have sort of like a emotional moment, you know, sort of like feeling regretful over like them allowing someone to come to pain, and then like another the comedic relief coming in and just saying something absolutely insane, completely shaking up the nature of a scene. It just feels so perfectly sort of like sitcom-y TV show or something like that. Anyway, talking about goofs, I suppose. Turns out, not yesterday, but the day before yesterday, I accidentally uploaded an 1,000 times resist episode as an Animal Crossing episode, and I was like, whoops, didn't mean to do that. It's because I forgot to upload it the day before, and I woke up in the morning and I somehow I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute, I think I've got to do that. So I uploaded it, but I didn't realise I actually titled it wrong. I don't even know how I didn't notice, because the 1,000 times resist thumbnail is much different to the Animal Crossing one. Which I guess you'll see tomorrow, because that'll be the 1,000 times resist. That was the episode, which if you caught it early, you got a sneak peek of. So yeah, whoops. This time I'll make sure to actually upload the correct one. Anyway, oh, just got bitten. I also say, I think I got bitten on my arm. I got like this huge sort of like swelling here. I don't know when. I've got like 3 or 4 bites on my legs. I don't know when I got bitten by so many sort of mosquitoes. But yeah, I'm like covered in sort of like bruises and bites now. When this happened, I don't know. But I literally only noticed like in the evening when I sort of like rested my wrist against the desk and was like, oh, what's that sharp feeling? I looked down and I was like, whoa, there's so much swelling on my arm. When did this happen? Who knows? Anyway, on that note, I think I'll round this episode up here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been dear darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.